All right, this is part 7 of what I said in chapter 6 of Gender and Development in Nigeria. So, what are the specific examples of structural violence that affect Nigerian women in politics? Specific examples of structural violence that affect Nigerian women in politics. I offer 6 specific examples that demonstrate how structural violence impedes the participation and representation of Nigerian women in the political sphere. These examples showcase how deeply entrenched inequalities and systemic biases create a hostile environment for women seeking to engage in politics, reinforcing their marginalization and undermining their capacity to exercise their political rights. 1. Violence against women in elections, or VAWIE. The source, the chapter emphasizes how violence against women in elections, encompassing a range of abuses from verbal harassment to physical assault to even assassination, serves as a potent tool of structural violence, specifically targeting women in politics to intimidate them and discourage their participation. This violence, often perpetrated with impunity, creates a climate of fear that restricts women's ability to campaign, vote, or hold office freely and safely. The sources that I consult show that there's a persistence of violence against women in elections. And this combines with the state's inadequate response to such violence. And it reflects a broader societal acceptance of violence against women. This normalizes women's subordination and silences their voices within the political era. Second, lack of gender equality in citizenship. In the chapter, I show that structural violence is embedded within legal and administrative frameworks that deny women full and equal citizenship rights. This hinders their ability to engage in politics on an equal footing with men. While some progress has been made in addressing discriminatory laws, such as the constitutional amendment allowing women to pass on their citizenship to their spouses, social and administrative norms continue to limit women's ability to exercise their political rights fully. I point to the failure of the Nigerian government to pass 5 gender bills that were proposed to remedy these situations, despite sustained advocacy from women's rights organizations, including Womanifesto, a coalition of over 250 women-led organizations, and others. This is a stark example of how structural barriers continue to impede women's political empowerment. Third, limited legal capacity. I show how structural violence operates by restricting women's legal capacity. It limits their ability to own property, enter into contracts, and engage in legal transactions independently. These are factors that are crucial for effective political participation. This limited legal agency, often rooted in customary laws and patriarchal norms, restricts women's economic autonomy and reinforces their dependence on men, further undermining their capacity to engage in politics as independent actors. I argue that without full legal capacity, women are denied equal opportunities to build the resources and networks necessary for successful political careers. Fourth, unequal access to education and resources. I connect the marginalization of women in politics to their unequal access to education and economic resources, highlighting how structural violence operates by creating a cycle of disadvantage that limits women's opportunities to participate in the political sphere. And girls and women face significant barriers to education, including poverty, cultural norms, and insecurity, which restrict their access to knowledge, skills, and networks that are essential for political engagement. This educational disadvantage, compounded by limited economic opportunities, restricts women's ability to accumulate the financial resources, social capital, and confidence necessary to compete in a male-dominated political arena. Fifth, reinforcement of patriarchal norms. I demonstrate how structural violence is deeply entwined within the persistence of patriarchal norms that confine women to the domestic sphere, prioritizing their reproductive roles and discouraging them from pursuing political ambitions. These norms, often embedded within cultural and religious beliefs, portray women as ill-suited to the demands of politics, reinforcing the notion that leadership is inherently masculine. I note how these gendered expectations limit women's access to mentorship, networks, and support systems that are crucial for negotiating and navigating the political landscape, further hindering their ability to rise within the ranks of political parties or seek and succeed in elected office. The sixth is lack of political will and implementation. I highlight how structural violence manifests in the lack of genuine political will and commitment from the Nigerian government to address the systemic barriers that impede women's political participation. Despite adopting international conventions like the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, and developing national policies like the National Gender Policy of Nigeria, I argue that the Nigerian state has consistently failed to translate these commitments into concrete actions that promote women's political empowerment. This lack of implementation, coupled with the tokenistic appointment of a few women to high visibility positions without addressing the underlying structural inequalities reinforces the marginalization of the vast majority of Nigerian women within the political system. I provide what I think is a compelling case for understanding how structural violence operates to exclude women from the political sphere in Nigeria. These examples that I offer, the six, demonstrate how deeply embedded inequalities and systemic biases work to limit women's opportunities, agency, and representation within the political system, undermining the very foundations of democratic governance. And that's